but we definitely have to start with a major retirement in the LPL, in all of League of Legends competitive. I'm talking about Uzi. Uzi calling it quits after an illustrious career that spanned multiple championships, the famed bot laner for Royal Never Give Up, MSI champion in 2018, multiple-time LPL champion. Really leaves a strong legacy, Emily, in the LPL and in League of Legends competitive. But when you think back on Uzi's career, as we dive into this for the next while here, what's really the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I mean, I think I wrote about this in my kind of farewell to Uzi, but I think what he really did more than anything else was give the LoL Pro League a face to the international audience, because I can't stress enough how much of a just general major sport League of Legends is in China, and we don't always get to see that from our perspective. And I think a lot of people didn't realize how big the LPL was, and they didn't realize the LPL kind of existed at all outside of a kind of very nebulous, oh yes, they also play League of Legends in China, and here are their teams. And the one exception was Uzi, because he qualified for 2 Worlds finals back-to-back in 2013, 2014. And he was such a strong individual player with such a strong personality, and really required for the beginning of his career, and arguably for all of it. But I think he did become more of a flexible player as his career went on, and he himself has said this through multiple interviews on how he grew and matured, not only on the Rift but off of it as a person, in regards to how he communicated with his teammates. But he gave the LPL a face, right, to the international audience. And I think one of the things that we now talk about the LPL being the best league in the world based on their international results at the past 2 World Championships, that actually started with Uzi in 2018 when he won his first LPL championship after trying for 5 years, and went on to win the Mid-Season Invitational. And that started China's international dominance. Not streak, because obviously G2 won last year's Mid-Season Invitational, but it did start this idea that China is one of, if not the best league in the world, and you're going to have to face up to that. And that also started with Uzi. So for me, in all aspects, from just giving the LPL a face, giving it a familiar player that everyone kind of gravitated towards all the way back in 2013, and then starting this whole idea that China, not South Korea, was now the strongest region in the world, that also started with Uzi. So when I think of him, I always think of how he opened up the LPL to every the international audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think of him like that too, in terms of being a funnel. I think for a lot of us who have been fans of the LPL for a long time and watchers of the LPL, even before Riot sort of got involved with English Cast at first party, right back when Kelsey Moser and Proscurin were sort of doing it out of their apartment in Chicago with LPL English. This is someone that you were always interested in watching. And one moment, and I know we're going to break down some, but something not game related that I sort of personified sort of what he was relative to athletes in the rest of the world and in China, is he was a part of the Shut Up and Dribble campaign, the LeBron James Nike campaign. Yeah. He had a shirt that was made by Nike that it was his, and he modeled for Nike. And you're just like, wow, we saw Faker on Coke cans at one point in South Korea, and we can break that down a little bit when we talk about those two guys and how they sort of both got their hot start in the same year. But for me, Faker is to Korean esports what Uzi is to Chinese esports in terms of being this icon above all else. And I think that really that him stepping away, and I know that he talked about sort of his health, which has started a whole different conversation. He said that he was diagnosed as a diabetic, and he's also talked about how sort of his lifestyle was relatively unhealthy as he worked to achieve success within League. But that started a whole nother conversation, and I think with someone being that big, it's even more impactful that he sort of was open and honest about that as well.
He, like you mentioned, he was plagued with injuries throughout his career. And of course, he retired in June. And Tyler, he was speaking of his popularity and how famous he is in China. and someone mentioned this in chat. He was the 2019 Weibo Person of the Year. And when I say that, I'm not saying esports Person of the Year. I'm saying person. Every realm, every genre, Uzi is selected. I mean, that how does that even happen for somebody who plays League of Legends? And I'm not dismissing it as diminutive. I'm just saying, like, this is incredible that somebody who plays video games is selected as a Person of the Year on a giant platform in a particular country that happens to have 1 billion people.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the whole new face of a generation, right? Or the face of a new generation, where that was a fan vote. It was fans voting for Uzi, kind of showing the fan power he has. His announcement video where he announced his, he had a 15-minute interview with one of the Chinese state media television networks over in China. That was posted on Weibo, and in under 3 hours, it had over 12 million views. So just to kind of like put out how big he is. His goodbye message, I believe, had over 2 million likes in less than 3 hours. It was shared over 1 million times in that time frame. It was huge news. And I'm different from Emily and Jacob, where they come from the LPL side. I've always been an LCK person. I've been reporting on LCK since 2013, since the rise of Faker. Me and Faker, I've written a lot about him. I've always been on the opposite side of, Emily and Jacob in that kind of the relationship, where the first time I really talked to Uzi and the first time I really met him was at the 2016 World Championship in San Francisco in the group stages. And I remember I was still, very new to doing, like, the whole glitz and glamour of, doing an esports event. It was my first year at ESPN. And I remember that Uzi, he did the Chinese media. If you don't know, there's so much Chinese media at World Championships that they're not allowed to do one-on-one interviews. Because if they were allowed to do one-on-one interviews, it would take way too much time. So all the Chinese media at Worlds are basically put in a big, like, pit of press, and they have to do interviews all together at once. So Uzi had to do
like a scrum.
A scrum. So yeah, he did a 30 or 40-minute scrum because he's that popular in front of, like, very hot stage lights with the media for 40 minutes for Chinese media. Then he did Travis Gafford for another 20 minutes. So it's been an hour of him interviewing, and I'm supposed to interview him last. And by the time he's done with his Travis, he is pouring sweat. He is literally, like, it looks like he's about to faint. All the media, like, all of, like, the PR reps for Riot are rushing over to him, like, trying to bring him water and trying to, like, calm him down because he is red as a tomato. He looks like he's about to pass out. And I'm just like, please, you don't have to do my interview. Like, I don't, like, if you faint, if you faint during my interview, like, this is not going to be good. It's not going to be good. China will not be happy with me. So I'm just like, no, please go, like, please, like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to do an interview. But Uzi, look, like, he talks to the translator and he's like, I want to do this interview. Please let me do this interview. I want to do this. I'm good. Give me some water. I can do this. And he sat down with me for 20 minutes and we just talked for 20 minutes doing this interview. And even though he was uncomfortable, he's pouring sweat, he's drinking water, he looks like he's on the verge of tears, he still went through it. And that was the day I was like, this guy's, like, I have utmost respect for Uzi for the rest of my career, because we all know as journalists, it can be difficult at times to get players to open up or even wanting to do interviews. We've all been declined before. We've all had times where interviews are just going to, snake out of an interview being like, yeah, we've agreed to it, but I'm going to leave now. Sorry, I don't feel like doing it. But the fact that he he literally was on the verge of fainting and still did that interview, it's remarkable. And that memory still sticks to me to this day. And he's an incredible guy, incredible talent, and an incredible interview.
That's a great story. Just a side note to that, also as journalists, can you imagine all the Chinese media, how they were feeling when they saw you and Travis getting the only one-on-one interviews, though? Like, just think, put yourself in their shoes. Yeah. It's like, man, we just did a scrum and we didn't get any one-on-one time, and then here comes Travis.
That's every Worlds. It sucks. It sucks, right? Like, but that's every Worlds. Just, pulling back the curtain a bit, that's every World Championship. Yeah. Me and Emily and Jacob have all been to Worlds a bunch of times. Because there's so much... Just because it's so big in China, there will be 30, 40, 50 reporters from China, from different TV networks and websites there just for Worlds.
At quarterfinals in 2016, we were in this giant tent. I think Emily was there actually. Also, if you remember, like, half the tent was Chinese media and the rest was everybody else from the rest of the world. Korean, North American, European, etc. Like, but literally half this giant tent was nothing but Chinese media. And the rest of us were kind of like put in a corner together.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
That's where I met PDD.
Clearly, who?
That's where I met PDD. I don't know
nice.
if he was there as media, but like Scar and I just randomly met him because he was hanging out with the Chinese media.
So back to Uzi I. So Emily, like when he came onto the scene, I mean, he's had a long career, right? And I'm wondering, like, what will he be remembered from an in-game perspective? What will he be remembered for in terms of his impact and what he brought to the game and his approach to the game? What will he be remembered for?
I mean, I think, so in China, for anyone that tuned into like that one time I made you guys watch IPL 5 finals with me. I
loved it.
So did I.
Wei Xiao is kind of known as like the godfather of AD carries or whatever, right? For modernizing the position as we know it, back in season 2. Like end of season 1, beginning of season 2, I think is really when he, like his playstyle kind of came up and started. But I think Uzi I will be remembered as the like aspirational bot laner in China for literally every other bot laner that comes up. Like if you look at I know Kelsey Moser has talked about this, I believe, in regards to Clear Love, where you have so many junglers who are coming up the Chinese solo queue ladder. Like Tian was one from FPX last year where he's like, I saw Clear Love and like I knew I wanted to be a jungler, right? And I know Tyler's talked to like players like Ucal where they're like, oh, I saw Faker and I knew then, like I saw Faker live and I knew I wanted to be a mid laner. I knew I wanted to do this. And Uzi I is that for bot laners to like, for general League of Legends players as well, but for bot laners especially. Like I think he really set the tone for how LPL bot lanes behave. And LPL bot lanes, for people that aren't familiar with them or haven't heard Double Lift talk about them or haven't heard anyone else talk about going up against an LPL bot lane, they are known for their constant aggression. And by that, I don't mean they're like always skirmishing, but they are fighting you over every CS. Like they will sometimes ignore the wave just to auto attack you. And that is something that you pretty much like not only see from LPL bot lanes, but I think it has been established as like the 2v2 play style for LPL bot lanes, right? Until like a little bit more recently when you saw like a lot more roaming supports. But even then, like this is what LPL bot lanes are known for. And I think in game, that really did start with Uzi I. And you see a lot of these bot laners coming up who are like, I want to be like Uzi I want to play like Uzi I, this kind of like very aggressive, fight over every CS, fight over every minion, that kind of started with him. And you see it in Jackie Love, you see it in iBoy, you see it in, like, if you're looking at younger up-and-coming AD carries, you see it in Wuxi, you see it in Huanfeng, like, you see it in all of these players where they're just really willing to fight over everything. And I'm not saying that's necessarily always the best decision, but I do think that aggression started with Uzi I, and it's something that's been incredibly successful for Chinese AD carries following. And that is really where I think he's like made his mark as the default Chinese AD carry alongside Wei Xiao. Because I do still think people think of Wei Xiao as like the person who started it all, but Uzi I is the one that like honed that play style.
But I feel like there's a generational difference there, to your point, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, very few people that watch Modern League of Legends probably ever got to see Wei Xiao play a game, right? Like, there's been so much fan turnover since really, even like Season 4 and Season 5, I've met people who didn't get to watch those, which is not that long ago, only like 5 or 6 years ago. There's been so much turnover, I feel like Uzi, because of how long his career has been from 2013 to present, right? A 7-year career, and he's had so much international success pretty consistently, even just appearing at Worlds, right? Like, has had so much international success over such an extended period of time. And to what we were mentioning earlier was like, it was kind of in the right place at the right time. And obviously he was a part of this, but like, as the LPL went from being sort of the region that like the nerds like Emily and myself would stay up and watch at night, like to sort of the premier region of League of Legends, like he was there the entire time that was happening, right? Like, and he became the icon. So I think like that reach, to Emily's point about him being sort of like the AD carry to look to, I think that extends even farther past China. If you look at players like Perks has talked about this when he first made the swap from mid to AD carry originally, wanting to be like Uzi, and the same thing for others like Upset and others that are younger too, right? Like they aspire to be like Uzi and like Forgiven and some of these other guys who are like hyper aggressive, you know, very, very straightforward rather than passive farm bot laners. So I think generally like that reach, he's sort of a product of circumstance, but certainly he's part of the reason that China became so successful in the end anyway.
Yeah, when I talk to bot laners, I mean, again, like I brought up Doublelift because I feel like he brings up Uzi in like every conversation when you ask him like who does he watch outside of you know his own region. And I think the big thing is that Uzi also set this trend with other LPL bot laners that if you want to watch strong 2v2s only, you watch LPL bot lane perspectives. Like, regardless of who it is. Obviously, everyone always wanted to watch Uzi because he was known as the best. But, like, this also started the trend of LPL bot lanes are insane in the 2v2. They will fight you. If you want to see bot lane micro, watch LPL bot lanes. And that also, I think, in my opinion, started with him.